Good morning, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. It's 10 o'clock. I know we'll have a lot more participants coming in. We have about 30 people on right now. Wanted to take a moment and welcome everybody. This is the Florida Sustainability Directors Network Green Fleet call. There's been a lot of interest in learning about best practices and different implementations that cities have been doing with regards to green fleet. So we wanted to set up a call for not only the sustainability directors, but also fleet directors and anyone else interested in trying to green their fleet. So basically some ground rules before we get started is I wanted to remind everybody first, all the presentations and resources, including the bios of our speakers, contact information, as I said, the presentations and a best practices manual that we created here in Coral Gables have been attached to the meeting invitation. So you can find all that information there. I also wanted to remind everybody to please mute your line. Looks like mostly everybody has done that, so thank you. And then I also wanted to encourage everybody to please ask questions in the chat box as we're going along. We're going to wait to the very end. We have about 25 to 30 minutes at the end of the webinar to then be able to ask questions. So we want to definitely encourage that. We have a list of great speakers here today, and I'll introduce them before each of their presentations. I actually have Jared Walker and Dory here in my office with me. So hey, here they are. And I know Chris is joining us on the Zoom call from Orlando. So we're happy to be here everyone. To present to everybody. And I want to go ahead and get started. First, I want to introduce Jared's going to be our first presenter. I want to introduce Jared. Jared is the technical fleet lead for the fleet electrification, where he's responsible for providing technical fleet management and operational support to the team. With 10 plus years experience in fleet management at LeasePlan, a global leader in mobility, he is well equipped to support the efforts to electrify private and public fleets. Jared's experience is varied and diverse, from providing lease services to large industrial corporations to single vehicle leases for small businesses. He provides creative solutions that fit the needs of the customer. And Jared's based in Atlanta, Georgia. So I'm going to bring up his presentation and go ahead and turn it over to him.
Thanks so much, Matt. Hey, everybody. Thank you very much for the time today. Just going to kind of go through some of the updates that we've made to the program since this past summer. We had a big meeting with the U.S. Conference of Mayors in Honolulu. Made some announcements. The program is expanding, and so that's really great. So we'll give a little background on the Electrification Coalition, my work there, and how we're supporting cities to electrify their fleet. Okay. Do I hit the arrow? This here. Okay. So just really quick, a little background on the Electrification Coalition. So we're a nonpartisan, not-for-profit organization dedicated to accelerating mass adoption of EVs. So little background. This is some of the work that we've been involved in historically and are continuing our work in. So obviously, I'm here to talk about the Climate Mayors EV Purchasing Collaborative. That's the most part of my day as I'm working on that. And I'm assisting over 420 cities around the country to electrify their fleets. We've got a team in Columbus, Ohio, working for the Smart Columbus office. Rock EV, Rochester EV Accelerator. It's an accelerator program. We work very closely with the city of Atlanta, and then a variety of other work. And specifically, I'd like to point out the American Cities Climate Challenge. A lot of those cities are also involved with our Climate Mayors EV Purchasing Collaborative. And so we do a lot of work with them. Just to kind of focus in a little bit on the Climate Mayors work, year to date, we've got 2,391 committed EVs. And those through the program are committed to be procured before 2021. So our kind of cutoff for that is 2020. So that's a pretty significant number. And in my opinion, that is really hitting at what we're trying to do with the program, which is to accelerate EVs and EV adoption in municipal fleets and really drive the market forward. So this is sending a clear signal to manufacturers and everybody involved in the industry that this demand is there and it's happening. We've got 157 cities, so each one of those Cities has obviously a number of vehicles committed to the program. 40 different states, which is big. We do a lot of work, obviously, in California and New York and LEV-ZEV states. Obviously, I'm here in Florida. We're doing a lot of work in Florida. And so this is a nationwide effort. And it's awesome to see. And then one of the things we're starting to track as well are the buses. So we've got 56 battery electric buses that are committed to the program right now. That's a big factor moving forward. And, each one of those buses represents 200 or 300 vehicles. So it's a big deal. So impact of the collaborative so far. So based on these commitments, we're able to reduce gasoline usage by up to 1 million gallons a year. So that's all of those vehicles that are committed. That's what that would equate to. Transitioning 25 million electric miles. So transitioning from using solely petroleum-based fuels to the 25 million electric miles for those vehicles. And that's more than $75 million in purchasing power that we are committing to the electric vehicle market. Again, sending a clear signal to manufacturers. As I mentioned at the outset of this, we made some big progress this summer. We had a big announcement. We've added 2 new fleet management companies to our platform. So one of them is D&M Leasing. They're based there in Dallas. They're able to help us to monetize the tax credit and pass that along to procurement officials. Just what's happened here in Coral Gables. Steve and Matt have been able to do that to leverage that federal tax credit to make it easier to get into electric. Enterprise as well. Everybody's familiar with Enterprise, so it's great to work with them. We're really glad to have them as part of the program as well, because a lot of cities already have a relationship with Enterprise. Just makes things that much easier, and they're able to provide us with very, very cost competitive access to EVs and a wide variety of them as well that might not be available everywhere. We're able to leverage that national procurement and allocation. This is a big one. So just to be very clear, we currently on our website, which is www.driveevfleets.org, if you go out there, you will not see school buses yet. This is something that's happening with our partner Sourcewell. This fall, we're opening up the bid with electric school buses, and so that's a huge opportunity there. I've been working with school districts already on sort of mapping this out and planning how that's going to look and how that rollout's going to be. So just so that everybody knows, we're opening up that solicitation for an RFP this fall. So we will be adding some larger models to the platform, including these school buses. Really quick, I wanted to highlight one of our member cities that we've done a lot of work with recently is Chula Vista, California. You can see some of the vehicles there that they've procured for their fleet. Just wanted to give some numbers and some specifics of why it made sense for Chula Vista to drive electric vehicles and to increase their number of EVs in their fleet. So you can see here some stats about Chula Vista, 50 square miles, population of 268,000. And so they set out with a goal of 40% alternative fuel vehicles by 2020. Very ambitious goal. And so we actually were able to help them to get towards that number. So some of the specifics on their fleet, they got 26 EVs that they procured with our assistance through the collaborative. We helped them with getting those vehicles and monetizing the tax credit. Of those, 13 Ford Fusion plug-ins for the police, 13 Bolts for other departments, and 4 of those Bolts were cargo vehicles, which means that it's basically a seat delete, opening up the back of it, and you can use that as essentially a small cargo van. We also worked a lot on fleet right sizing. So as you'll see here, the total cost $759,000, including the upfit, was the total cost of that procurement. Average cost of vehicles around 28, and estimated fuel savings 61%. So looking at all of those numbers, it really made sense from an economic standpoint for them to move forward with that procurement. That's not even factoring in the extreme savings of the maintenance, which we were actually discussing earlier. So here's just sort of a breakdown of what we were looking at with their fleet when we ran the numbers and did that TCO. Just wanted to throw that up there. So we're looking at 15 cents a mile on the old vehicles, 3 cents a mile on the battery electric vehicles. So 80% decrease, that's pretty good. So that's maintenance and repairs. So just wanted to give an example and just a little quick shot of what that cargo bolt looks like. This is an actual picture of the inside. So you got 56.6 feet of cargo space. It's a good option. So they were able to phase out some F-250 trucks and actually replace them with these Chevy Bolts. And just kind of wrapping up, here's my information. Thank you so much for the time. I really appreciate it. And I'll pass it along to Matt. And I think Dory's up next. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jared. Awesome presentation as usual. So right now I'm going to turn it over to Dory. I'm going to introduce her first as I'm bringing up her presentation. So Dory joined the Southern Alliance for Clean Energy in 2017 in the newly created role as the Electric Vehicle Program Associate and became the Electric Vehicle Program Coordinator in 2019. She's working to accelerate the transition to electric vehicles by promoting the growth of electric vehicle ownership and supporting EV-friendly policy and programs. Central to her work is educating and engaging stakeholders, identifying strategic policy to propel EV usage, and advocating for comprehensive EV infrastructure. She was recently appointed to the board of Drive Electric Florida and the City of Tarpon Springs Citizen Advisory Sustainability Committee. She is a graduate of the University of South Florida with a Master's of Public Health degree and received her Bachelor's of Science degree in Biology from Florida Southern College. And Dory always gives a wonderful presentation, just like Jared, so I hope you guys enjoy it.
Good morning, everyone. So thank you, Matt, for hosting and having us on. I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about the benefits of electric transportation and then also about our program that we have to help local municipalities. So a little bit about SACE. The Southern Alliance for Clean Energy is a regional membership organization that promotes responsible energy choices to ensure clean, safe, and healthy communities throughout the Southeast. And that's my contact information. So feel free to reach out to me, Dory@cleanenergy.org, and that's my cell. I'll have my contact on at the end as well. I also wanted to invite everyone to join us. Our website is electrifythesouth.org, and our social media is at Electrify the South on Facebook, and it's Electrify South on Twitter. So why electric vehicles? Unfortunately, the transportation sector is now the largest source of carbon dioxide pollution in the United States. So we all need to be addressing that, and that's what we're talking about today. So some of the benefits of electric vehicles are that they save money. EVs have much lower fuel and maintenance costs than a traditional internal combustion engine. They also save time. There's no stops to gas stations or time wasted on oil changes. And electric vehicles also protect public health and the environment. So overall, driving electric will save about $10,000 over 10 years of ownership. And wanted to point out the lower fuel costs. So it costs about 3.5 cents per mile to drive an electric vehicle. And it costs about 10 cents per mile to drive a gas-powered car, and that's assuming 23 miles per gallon, and that gas is $2.25 a gallon, which we all know fluctuates and is harder to project than a pretty stable cost of electricity. They also have much lower maintenance costs because there are fewer parts and fewer things to go wrong. So there's about 20 moving parts in the drive shaft of a traditional electric car and about 2,000 in an internal combustion car. So there's a lot of time that is reduced on maintenance. I'm hearing a lot of
Yeah, if we can have somebody has their line unmuted. If you could please mute your line. We're hearing some background noise. Thank you.
So, today, on average, and this was calculated by the Union of Concerned Scientists in a 2018 report, an average EV on the road has about the same greenhouse gas emissions as a car that's getting 80 miles per gallon, and there isn't any internal combustion engine that's getting 80 miles per gallon. In Florida, based on our energy source, it's about 58 miles per gallon. But I wanted to highlight that electric vehicles are getting cleaner as the grid gets cleaner and more renewable energy is put on the grid, and more fossil fuel plants are being taken offline. So EVs continue to get cleaner, whereas that can't be said with the traditional vehicle. So we took a look at electric vehicles and wanted to talk about offshore drilling. And we ran some numbers to see how many electric vehicles it would take to offset any gasoline that could be potentially produced by opening new areas of offshore drilling. And we found that it would take about 20 to 45 million EVs on the road by the early 2030s to offset 100% of new gasoline that would be drilled from currently protected waters. And while this sounds like a really big number, it's actually very achievable. So EVs would need to comprise between 7 and 16% of new vehicle sales by 2035. And to illustrate how feasible that is, Bloomberg New Energy Finance projected that 57% of passenger vehicles would be electric by 2040. And the Edison Electric Institute projects that we'll have 18.7 million electric vehicles on US roads by 2030 alone. So it's very, very achievable. So in that framing, we've launched a campaign called Protect Our Coast, Drive Electric, in order to partner with local governments around Florida to advance policies that would proactively accelerate our transition to clean transportation, reduce oil demand, mitigate climate change pollution, and help ensure our coasts are not threatened by offshore drilling and the effects of climate change. So the goal of the campaign is that local governments accelerate the transition to electric vehicles through adopting targeted policies. And the outcomes that we hope to achieve with the campaign are no new offshore drilling in the Atlantic, a cleaner environment, better public health, and equitable access to the benefits provided by electric transportation. These are our partners. So the policy guide is a comprehensive suite of policy options that a city or county could enact, and we're calling it our policy toolkit. And the toolkit contains specific policies that can be enacted by at the local level to facilitate the transition to electric transportation. So it's not to suggest that a city or a county would take every recommendation in the guide, rather it be used as a menu of options to best fit a tailored solution for their community. So we created the toolkit as in a digital form. We have 8 categories, and we've chosen to present the material electronically on a website so that we can continually update the information and have links that are current. There's also a downloadable version of the toolkit on the website as well. So our first tool in the toolkit is to create an overarching transportation electrification plan and a roadmap for your community. So the plan can incorporate different elements from each of the categories. And we also recommend looking at federal and state funding to help reduce the cost, and engage with your local utility as they may have expertise on how to make the transition more cost effective. We also provide roadmaps of several cities that have already paved the way with an earlier start. So Atlanta, Portland, and Seattle are listed on the website. Our second tool in the toolkit is to establish fleet goals. So we give examples of ways to develop goals, like develop an EV acquisition goal, and that could be either a percentage of the fleet or a set number by a set date. And then we also share the concept of leasing in order to gain access to the federal tax credit. And we also share the resolutions for other municipalities that have already passed EV fleet goals. And we also include the Climate Mayors Purchasing Collaborative that Jared just spoke about. So the third tool in the toolkit is to promote EV charging access and infrastructure. Some examples in this bucket are EV-ready building codes. Another way that cities can help increase charging station infrastructure is to streamline the permitting process. And another is to install workplace charging, both for city employees and encourage businesses that are coming into the community to install workplace charging as an amenity for their employees. So those are just a few of the actions, and I encourage you to go through the website to get a complete list of all of the policy recommendations in this category. So there's quite a few in the EV charging and infrastructure bucket. So the fourth tool is education and outreach. So cities and counties can have a big impact and help educate their community members by adding information about driving electric on their website. They can also host events, whether they be presentations or ride and drive events. SACE launched a Driving on Sunshine campaign. It's an EV roadshow where we can bring electric vehicles out onto the road so that people can experience driving electric firsthand and make that personal connection. And I would be happy to partner with any cities that are on today that want to host an event. And I'll be talking more about that at the end of the presentation. So the fifth tool is to incentivize electric driving. And we're acutely aware that we are living in the Southeast United States, and incentivizing means something very different compared to other parts of the country. So we aren't proposing aggressive rebates or anything like that, but what we're talking about is free or reduced parking, waiving permitting fees for installing the charging stations, and again, there's other policies that we have listed on the website. The sixth bucket is to establish public transportation goals, and a lot of the elected officials that are leading in local governments also sit on their transit authorities. So we want to make sure that we highlight the benefits of electrifying public transit fleets, and make sure that they're educated and aware that there are electric school buses, there are electric transit buses, and they have huge savings in fuel and maintenance costs over their lifetime. And I also wanted to highlight the Volkswagen settlement funds. So I'm sure you are all aware that there's money to be had through the Volkswagen settlement funds. So it's a $166 million pot for the state of Florida. They released their draft plan in mid-July, and it called for 15% of the money to be spent on EV charging infrastructure and 70% of the money to be spent on transit, school, and shuttle buses. So after they solidify the final draft plan, they will put out RFPs to see what projects people are interested in working on. And I would be happy to connect with you about this if you'd like more information. So the seventh bucket in the toolkit is expanding equity and access. Frontline communities are those facing the worst impacts from climate change, and they typically experience disproportionately negative impacts from pollution caused by the transportation sector. And they also experience stronger barriers to electric transportation due to the higher upfront costs and lack of access to charging infrastructure. So it's really important when we are creating a roadmap for a city or a county that electrification and prioritizing frontline communities is at the forefront. So the last tool in our toolkit is to work with your local utility, and that may seem obvious, but they are essential partners in looking at the most cost-effective way to site the charging station locations. And also cities and counties can ask their utility to roll out a charging station pilot, similar to what Duke Energy has done on the west coast of Florida. So as I mentioned, we launched a program called Driving on Sunshine, and we just had a successful event with Congressman Christ and Commissioners Long from Pinellas County, Mayors Kreisman from the City of St. Petersburg, and Mayor Brown in Largo. My colleague, Jason Casey, is traveling across the state to bring EVs to Floridians, and it's free to have your city or county participate. The drivers need to be 25 years of age or older because of insurance, and we take a snapshot of their driver's license to make sure that they're a valid driver. So we have the insurance to cover the ride and drives, and I would be happy to schedule an event with your community if you'd like to connect on that. I also wanted to make you aware that we're doing a webinar on October the 9th called Seamless Charging Experience for the EV Driver, What Policies Are Needed, Part 1, and Part 2 will be at the beginning of November. So this webinar is with Plug in America and the Southeast Energy Efficiency Alliance, along with the Southern Alliance for Clean Energy. So the two-part webinar will explore policies that state agencies, local governments, and regulators should adopt to prepare for an electric transportation future. So the first webinar will set the stage and discuss open access and payment options offered to make sure that the issue of interoperability is being addressed, and that's being able to communicate with the different charging networks. So that's going to be October 9th. There's the link, and Matt sent around the links to the presentations earlier, so I'd love to see you again on that. And there's my contact information one more time if you wanted to take that down. So thanks for listening.
Thank you, Dory. Amazing presentation as usual. So now we're going to move on
Great
to
work, Dory.
to Chris Castro. I'm going to take a moment to introduce Chris.
Matt,
Yes.
real quick, I sent you a quick note. I'm wondering if I can share my screen this time around. I actually just added something quickly. If that's a possibility, if not, then no worries. Then we'll go with plan A.
All right.
Is there a feature to
if you want to try to share your
at
screen.
the bottom? Yeah, it says I can't participate while another participant is sharing. So I guess let's just go the plan A. No worries about it. And I'll mention what that additional slide was.
All right, perfect. All right, so I'm opening Chris's presentation. I'm going to introduce Chris is the Director of Sustainability and Resilience in the City of Orlando. Chris coordinates the development, integration, and administration of the city's sustainability, energy, and climate policies and programs. Orlando launched the GreenWorks Orlando in 2007 to transform Orlando into one of the most environmentally friendly, socially inclusive, and economically vibrant communities in the nation. GreenWorks Orlando represents our commitment to utilize the city's regional leadership position to build partnerships and share resources that foster positive environmental changes. Chris does an amazing job up there in Orlando, and I'm sure you guys are going to learn a lot from his presentation. So go ahead, Chris, and I'll control your presentation.
Perfect. Thank you, Matt, for this opportunity, and I really appreciate everybody on the line joining us this morning. I'm excited to share more about what we're doing for our green fleet in general, what we're doing in the community to accelerate more electrification and alternative fuels. So if you go to the next slide, Matt introduced GreenWorks Orlando pretty well, but I just wanted to take this time to mention that our mayor, Buddy Dyer, has had a keen interest in prioritizing sustainability and resilience since as far back as 2007. This is when he launched the GreenWorks program and really thought about creating a model for other communities to emulate and advance, the triple bottom line. We really look at this office as kind of an in-house sustainability consulting firm, so to speak, for both internal operations as well as external partnerships to try to drive a culture of sustainability throughout the community. And this particular program was living in the mayor's office for the first 11 years, but as of October of last year, we formalized a new Office of Sustainability and Resilience within the executive department of the city to further make this effort permanent beyond just this mayor's term, but really in perpetuity. And so the GreenWorks program is administered by this newly established office, and good things are on the rise. Make a next slide. I wanted to point out a number of coalitions and focus that we have. The City of Orlando is one of the signers for the Under 2 MOU. It's the official Paris Climate Agreement for sub-national governments. These are states, counties, and cities that have the ability of directly aligning with the Paris Climate Agreement. And we joined this commitment along with the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy because of our keen interest in doing our part to minimize carbon emissions and to ensure that we're adapting to what's already baked in the changing climate. If you click next, I have a little animation, and I wanted to highlight one of our biggest goals is to transition the city's fleet to 100% alternative fuels and electric vehicles by the year of 2030. We were one of 10 cities who came together to start what's called the Energy Secure Cities Coalition. And it was really targeting how to make this transition over the course of the next decade. We are encouraging more cities to sign on to this commitment. And so if you already have a similar commitment, it might be a very easy thing for you to join. But certainly Google Energy Secure Cities Coalition to learn more. Next. So transportation in our perspective in GreenWorks, again, looks both internal at how to green our fleet and ensure that we have the proper infrastructure to withstand and support the services that we need. But then it also looks externally at how do we enable more bike and pedestrian paths. How do we unlock the bike share program that we have here? If you click next, there's also an animation showing our the Orlando Urban Trail. We are now in the development of an 8.5-mile bike loop around, fully protected around the downtown, almost like the Atlanta Beltway. And of course, one of the most popular alternative modes of transportation that people are joining is Sunrail. This is a 60-mile commuter rail system up and down the I-4 corridor, with Orlando being in the heart of it. We are excited that the Virgin train from South Florida will be connecting to Sunrail, and so you can have a seamless north-south connection and then east-west as well. This is going to be a pretty big deal for us. The other unique aspect that Orlando has is, over the last 20 years, we've administered a bus rapid transit system within our downtown. It's called the Limo, and I'll get into a little bit more later on in the presentation about what we're doing to transition the Limo to be a cleaner system. Next slide. So this gives you a little snapshot of our fleet. I mentioned that by 2030 our goal was to have 100% of the city's fleet vehicles powered by alternative fuels. And currently at this point in time, we have a fleet of close to 3,000 vehicles, but that includes also equipment and other things. When you look at raw numbers of cars on the road, it's a little over 2,000, and right now we're tracking at 86% of the fleet vehicles on the road having some form of alternative fuel or propulsion system, whether it's using biofuels. We use ethanol E85, or using B20 for biodiesel for any of the heavy duty, like fire trucks as an example, that don't have alternatives. Of course, we're using a significant amount of electric vehicles, and on the next slide I'll point those out. We have transitioned the entire garbage and recycling fleet. We have 72 garbage and recycling trucks, and we have transitioned them completely to hydraulic hybrid CNG garbage trucks. So everything is 100% CNG for those fleets, and then some smaller vehicles using propane as well. So you can see that there's a variety of different fuels that we're using, that we're coining as alternatives, and we're trying to move away from the traditional gasoline and diesel as the main goal there. And the breakdown, as you can see there, heavily weighted towards E85, and these are single passenger vehicles that we feel are suitable to transition to all electrics. So little by little, we're already starting to change out E85s to all electrics pretty drastically. And then we have an interesting mix of different types of electrics. If you go next to the next slide, I've tried to break down an additional slide on the electric vehicles. Yep, so here's our EV and plug-in hybrid focus. We have 179 electrics and plug-in hybrid electric vehicles within our fleet. We even have, and what you see there on the left is what's known as the EV Yard Dog. This is a vehicle that's used at wastewater treatment plants to move around trailers of biosolids around, obviously, the wastewater treatment plant. And often these are, diesel, very, very old trucks. We have now onboarded 2 EV Yard Dogs. I gotta modify this slide here. We purchased one for our wastewater treatment plant, Conserve 2, and we just bought another one for the Iron Bridge wastewater treatment plant. So these are just another way to move that forward. We also have started to work with our police department on transitioning our motorcycle fleet to all electrics. We have a small fleet now of 4 Zero motorcycles. We're in the process of purchasing an additional 6 EV motorcycles for the police, and they really like this for things like races and rallies and protests, but also sporting events. Orlando is one of the nation's sports and entertainment districts in the country. We host the Pro Bowl, the MLS. We're a FIFA contender for 2026, World Wrestling, you name it, a ton of different events here. And so during those major events, they're actually using the electric motorcycles because they feel, one, they're better performance. They don't have to worry about burning somebody's leg on an exhaust pipe, but also it allows them to be quieter in times of those types of events as well. So a lot of cool co-benefits going on. Right now, over the course of the next 2 years, as part of the Bloomberg Climate Challenge commitment, which I think Jared mentioned earlier, we are one of the 25 cities, and we are moving and adding as you can see, from 179 to 251 electric vehicles, which are already in the pipeline to be purchased and rolled in. In fact, on yesterday in City Council, we approved the 15 Nissan Leafs that you see there as an asterisk, and we're also buying an additional 15 Chevy Bolts. Those 30 vehicles are part of the mayor's EV purchasing collaborative that both Dory and Jared alluded to as well. So we committed to 30. We're committing to a lot more than that, as you can see, but for that collaborative in the first round, we committed to 30. And then lastly is at the very bottom, you'll see F-150, Ford F-150 Rivian Tech. So we've been in touch with Ford headquarters and Rivian, and we have a letter of intent to purchase 100 of the all-electric Ford F-150 trucks as they come online. As being a major contender for that, we're going to be receiving one of the first EV F-150 trucks that come to market, and we're going to be supporting the Clean Cities Coalition to get at least 500 of those sold within a 2-year period. So we're committing to 100, but then also committing to getting the word out and trying to recruit others to purchase upwards of 500 of those electric trucks coming online. If you haven't seen the YouTube video about the Ford F-150 EV truck pulling 1 million pounds, 1.2 million pounds online, it's unbelievable. It's going to blow your mind. This technology is going to revolutionize, in my opinion, the entire truck industry as we know it. So that's a little breakdown of our traditional. If you move next to the next slide, this is a little snapshot of some exciting projects on the rise. So on the left, you see this is where the Fleet and Facilities Maintenance Complex is. It's a 10-acre parcel. It overlooks downtown Orlando. And as you can see, there's 420 kilowatts of rooftop solar. That system produces 80% of the overall energy needs of that site. And what's unique about the site is it has 3 shifts. So it starts at 6 a.m. and it ends at 10:30 p.m. And so to be 80% powered throughout the entire operations and to have shoulder hours that obviously don't have any sun is a big deal. That means we're more than producing in the middle of the day, and we're net exporting. On the right-hand side, you see schematics of a design-build project that we're finalizing right now. We're almost done with completion on the design. And this is going to be a 250 kW solar carport that basically covers where you see some of the vehicles on the ground floor there in that left image. It will cover that whole area. It'll connect the 2 H's, the 2 verticals of the H building together, and we're excited about that. 17 dual-host EV charging stations will be deployed under that, and so about 32 additional electrics. This will be our holding spot for electric maintenance and the like. So we're pretty excited. We're going to add a battery system as well. It'll be a fully integrated system with our utility. Go next. We already kind of talked. Here's the image of the police motorcycle and kind of a Ford Focus plug-in and a couple of others. We're also doing some solar golf cart pilots at our golf course and our botanical gardens as well. Next. So EV readiness is something that's been focused. If we go next again, we've been really trying to figure out how to get ahead of the EV adoption curve that we are projecting. We just finished a study with NREL, the National Renewable Energy Lab, and a group called the GreenLink Group, who does forecasting, policy, and impacts on energy policy. And as you can see here, by 2050, 2/3 of the vehicles on the road in Orlando will be some form of electric propulsion, either full electric or hydrogen fuel cell electric or the like. And so we have a significant amount of growth that we're anticipating over the course of the next decade. If you go next, as a result, as part of the Bloomberg Challenge, we are in the process of deploying an additional 100 EV dual-host charging stations throughout the city. This is a snapshot of the publicly available charging stations in OUC territory. OUC is our electric and water utility. This does not cover all of the EV charging stations in Orlando, but as you can see, 148 dual-host chargers, 358 parking spots or ports that are electric ports, and they're broken down between level 1, 2, 3, and even Tesla and DC fast chargers. Metro-wide, to give you an idea, we actually have 350 stations and close to 700 ports in the greater Orlando metro. We're in the top 5 EV-ready cities per capita when you look at the number of chargers deployed based on the population that we have here. So a significant amount of EVs, obviously a good growth over in the Tampa Bay, St. Pete area as well. Next slide. And so we've identified now 40 sites, 39 new sites. These are all city-owned properties at community centers, garages, flat lots, admin buildings, and essentially have broken down the cost point based on bids that we've received to install now this 100 new stations. As you can see there, it's 111 new stations. Those are dual hosed, so they're, per station you have 2 ports or 2 parking spots. And I'm happy to say that yesterday was our first budget hearing. Next, I think in 2 weeks, we'll have the second and final one before October 1st. But within that new budget, I have $3.2 million of capital improvement funds that have been designated to Orlando for both solar expansion and this 100 charging stations. About $800,000 for charging stations, about $2.3 million, a little more than that for solar. So this is kind of the breakdown, and if this is a look at that, go to the next slide. Sorry, Matt. If you look at that, that's basically the location. The kind of what we're trying to be is equitable in terms of where we are locating these chargers, and so this shows the breakdown of all 6 commissioner districts to ensure that we are not favoring one part of the city over another. We are fully deploying these at our community centers throughout the community in general. Next. OUC, we've worked with OUC to develop really creative new programs, and most people will tell you that the biggest challenge to installing EV chargers is the upfront cost to buy those things. And what we've identified is a way in which we can offset that upfront cost through a program called the OUC Charge It, OUC Own It program. Essentially, the utility will fully capitalize and install a charger at your business. This is a workplace program, so it's got to be a business or a commercial business. And so they will install one or a bank of chargers, fully capitalize that, and then over a 5-year period, use the utility bill to pay that charger back over time. It's on-bill financing, and it essentially, again, offsets the upfront cost, that sting, and then pays for it incrementally over time. Actually, it's a 7-year term, not 5 years. So after the 7 years, either you own the system in the Own It program, or OUC owns it and they continue to maintain it, and you have a small service fee to maintain that system over time. And so there's 2 different ways to do it depending on the economics. Next slide. And then the last component that I wanted to share was our collaboration with our transit authority, Lynx. Lynx operates over 350 buses throughout Central Florida, and in downtown, as I mentioned, there's a bus rapid transit system that's operated by them but fully paid for by the City of Orlando. It's a subsidized service for our residents and our businesses and tourists. So this has 4 different lines throughout downtown. It goes east, west, north, south, goes all around the Central Business District. It's free of charge, and it's a fully protected bus lane. And what we've been doing is trying to figure out how do we electrify that bus lane. I'm happy to say that we just received $1.96 million from USDOT to purchase 8 electric buses to be our first kind of attempt at electrifying. There's a total of 20 that operate the BRT, so we're going to be close to half of those buses now being electric over the next 18 months. And the unique thing is that we found a new business model that allows us to accelerate more electric buses in our community. And that business model essentially is decoupling the battery from the bus, allowing the transit authority to buy the bus, but allowing the utility to buy the battery. And then the utility will lease the battery to the transit authority, almost like their fuel, right? They're leasing the battery back to the transit authority over a 10-year term. And what that does is it essentially allows the transit authority to, again, mitigate the upfront marginal cost difference from CNG to electric, right? There's about $300,000 difference there in the bus, and offset that $300,000 by OUC buying it, and then incrementally paying about $2,500 a month over that 10-year term to buy it off. The cool part about that is OUC essentially gets a free battery at the end of that 10-year term, which they're going to take the battery from the bus, put it as a stationary asset at a substation or a critical facility, and replace a new battery in that new bus to allow it for another 8 to 10 year useful life. So it's a really interesting acceleration model. This is part of the Bloomberg Challenge that we're trying to test out, this new effort. And Electrification Coalition has been a major part of helping us to pull this whole thing together. So big shout out to EC on that. Next slide. I think that's about it. I want to mention that this stuff moves needles. This is the report, ACEEE, American Council on Energy Efficient Economies. They look at the top 50 and now the top 100 cities at their clean energy strategy. In 2015, Orlando was 30th in the U.S., as you can see, second best in the Southeast. Matt, if you click next. 2017, we bumped up to 20th in the U.S. and got closer to Atlanta as the second best in the Southeast. And if you go one more time, the 2019 City Scorecard just came out a month or two ago, and Orlando moved to 15th spot in the U.S. and best in the Southeast. We now oversee Atlanta in terms of their overall clean energy strategy. This looks at both building efficiency, renewables, and it looks at transportation. And so it really is a comprehensive look at driving the clean energy economy. So this stuff moves needles, these programs. We're excited about the growth of it moving forward. I think that's it. Thank you, Matt, for the opportunity.
Thanks, Chris. Amazing as always. So now I'm going to transition to my presentation. I'm pulling double duty here by moderating and presenting. So please, everybody, bear with me. And I forgot to introduce myself at the beginning of the call. I'm Matt Anderson. I'm the Senior Sustainability Analyst with the City of Coral Gables. Similar to Chris, I help manage all the environmental initiatives in the city, from looking at our electricity use to water use to looking at our fleet as well. And we also have our fleet director in the room here, Steve Riley, who's been an amazing partner of ours and an amazing asset to our city and being able to transition our fleet to electric. And I'm going to walk everyone through that process of how we did that and how we're continuing to do that now. And we're very proud of how far we've come as a city. So I wanted to orient everyone where Coral Gables is. We're located right kind of smack dab in the middle of Miami-Dade County. We were founded in 1925. We were one of the first planned cities in the United States. Our city encompasses about 14 square miles. So we're about, small to medium-sized city. We have about 50,000 residents, 8,000 businesses, and you can just see there, we're a cut-through city as well for Miami-Dade County. We have a lot of passenger trips that come through our city. Over by 2035, we're projecting there's going to be over 750,000 trips that will start, stop, or pass through our city each day. So I kind of wanted to give everyone a high-level perspective of where we come as a city, being a small to medium-sized city here in Miami-Dade County. So where did our journey in electric vehicles really start? Well, it really started in our sustainability management plan and the development of that. We created a 10-year plan in Coral Gables of how we were going to really look at sustainability and how we're going to turn our city from a city that was really looking into being sustainable to really becoming and being a leader in sustainability. And what we did was we identified 23 projects that our department directors themselves actually created that we're going to create this sustainability management plan. And it focuses on a few different areas. Energy, obviously fleet, which we're here to talk about today, water, waste, land use, transportation, outreach, finance, really covers the entire spectrum when it comes to sustainability. And obviously within that plan, we wanted to set goals. And what we did was we said, okay, we want to reduce our fuel, energy, water use, and greenhouse gas emissions by 20% by 2025 off our 2013 baseline. And it really showed in developing this plan that not only does sustainability and all these efforts, including electric vehicle adoption, make sense for the environment, but it makes sense financially. And looking at our plan, we showed a 24% return on investment of over $4 million. So total cost to implement our sustainability management plan was coming in right around $24 million. And we were seeing, that $4 million return on investment brought into that. So it just made financial sense as well. And within that, we also developed a 2013 and a 2017 greenhouse gas emissions inventory, which a lot of cities around the country have to really measure what our impact is on the environment and seeing where we can improve. So what we're here to talk about today is our electric vehicle fleet. Right now, we have 53 electric vehicles in our fleet, something we're really, really proud of. We started purchasing electric vehicles in 2016 with our first batch of Nissan Leafs. We have in our fleet right now 35 Nissan Leafs and 18 Chevy Bolts. We have a fleet size of about 500 vehicles. We're a full-service city that provides our own fire, police, trash collection. We're very unique in that aspect of how we're a full service city within Miami-Dade County. And so we're really proud of basically 10% of our total fleet is currently electric. That's not including hybrids or anything like that. That's strictly electric vehicles. So really come a long way over the last couple of years in adopting this EV technology. Our goal, we're not done. Our goal is to add up to 78 vehicles within our fleet. So going from that 53 up to 78, which will be 60% of our administrative fleet is going to be electric. And you can see the departments that we've already been implementing electric vehicles. Here in our Public Works Department, where I'm located and our fleet director is located, we have electric vehicles here for all of our project managers, engineers, our code enforcement, in our Development Services Department. They have a large percentage of electric vehicles. Our parking department that does parking enforcement, 100% electric. Something that they're really, really excited about and have been loving the electric vehicles that we've given them. Our procurement and finance department, historical resources, and our police. So we have neighborhood safety aides that drive around. You'll see the picture of these GEM vehicles we have on the right there. And those are kind of, large electric golf carts, but we've also seen them transitioning not only from the electric golf carts, which is not even included. We have about 12 of those in our fleet right now. That's not even included in our 53 electric vehicle number. But we've been adopting those, and we're also seeing them transition from those golf carts as we're replacing them to the new extended range Chevy Bolts. And our fire department as well. Our fire inspector drives an electric vehicle, and all of our employees really love these vehicles, and it's been really interesting to see that transition, because I know at the very beginning we had some employees that were pushing back, saying, well, I don't want to be in charge of charging the vehicle, and I feel more comfortable with the gas-powered vehicle. And we really said, well, we have charging stations installed right behind your facilities, and it really made them feel comfortable. And even to the point where either our fleet director or myself got in the vehicle with them as we were giving them the vehicle, and really got them comfortable behind the wheel of the vehicle and the technology. And once they got comfortable with that, it's been amazing to see the transition from the being hesitant to now asking, okay, when's the rest of our department getting electric vehicles? So it's been amazing to see that transition. And I've even had employees come to me and say, hey, I love my electric vehicle for work. Where's the best place we can buy some for my personal use? So even incorporating that into their personal use has been, again, an amazing transition. And what we've done, and our fleet director's done an amazing job at it, is identifying the vehicles that we're going to be replacing within our fleet. And what we targeted was replacing non-emergency rescue recon vehicles. So obviously, for those of us, all of us on the line that work in cities, we're always thinking, okay, what to do after a hurricane or a natural disaster. And we didn't want to be depending on these vehicles to be able to respond to those emergencies in case the grid goes down, or anything like that. Even though all of our charging stations are backed up by generators, we still didn't want to, be left without vehicles during a time after a natural disaster. And so what we did was we targeted those vehicles that were non-rescue recon vehicles, non-emergency, and really that's where you see that goal of 78 vehicles and how we're going to get there. And as I said already, we have the 12 GEM electric vehicles that are neighborhood safety aides, which are basically an extension of our police department. They drive around and make sure, everything's going well in the neighborhoods. They talk to our residents and so on and so forth, and an additional layer of making our residents feel safe. So obviously with the electric vehicles, we have to have the infrastructure, and really that could be my biggest recommendation to anybody we're talking to on the line today, is make sure you have that infrastructure in place, before you get these vehicles. So right now in the city, and this is just the stations that we operate, again, we're 14 square miles. The vast majority of our density is located in our downtown area, and that's where we have located all of our charging stations. So we have 16 stations that we manage as a city, that we've either purchased or partnered with a private entity to be able to offer to our general public. You can see the breakdown there of 14 level 2 charging stations, and we have 4 level 3. 2 of those were actually donated to us by Nissan when we bought our first batch of Nissan Leafs. So they gave us the station, And then we were able to install it and have it running here at our public works facility, and we have one at our youth center. And you know and then we have 2 charging stations where you see the picture in the middle where that was put in by EVgo. So they spent about $400,000 installing those charging stations. All we did was provide them the parking space in our city hall, and those have been going really, really well as well. So that one is both public and private because some of our vehicles do use that charging station. And the charging state, the level 3 that we have in our public works facility is private for our vehicles only. So we have a nice mix. Within our parking garages, we have a number of stations located within there that we have that's both public and private. For our parking vehicles that go and park there overnight, they can charge, and also the general public that come in and use our parking garages, they're fully accessible to them as well. And what's interesting too is in working with our parking director, we haven't even started charging for the use of those, and we've had them in there since 2016. So all they have to do is pay for parking, and they have free access to the charging station, which has been a great incentive for our residents to be able to adopt, and especially those that live, you know, close to our parking garages that maybe live in a multifamily unit that don't have charging capabilities in their complex currently. This gave them the access to be able to do that. And we've had residents call us, me specifically, and basically say, look, I purchased an electric vehicle for my personal use because I saw the city investing in this infrastructure and investing in this technology, which is really positive to see where government's taking the lead on this and investing in this technology. And I know our fleet director can speak to that as well, to where we said as a government entity, we want to invest in this technology so the manufacturers continue investing in it. And we want to make that purchase and that commitment to electric vehicles. And just in our parking garages alone, we've had over 11,000 charging sessions, saved over 12,000 gallons of fuel, and avoided 28,000 pounds of greenhouse gas emissions. So like Chris was alluding to, and all of us have been alluding to on this, it has an impact. And we're not done. Same with the electric vehicles, with charging stations. We're going to add an additional 11 charging stations, all dual port. That'll be level 2 charging stations, whether it be in our parking lots, our surface parking lots, some of our private vehicles, our city fleet, like around our city hall. We're going to have a parking lot dedicated to them where they can continue to charge there and really continue to build out that infrastructure. Because if you don't have that infrastructure built out, it's hard to build it out within your fleet, and it's hard for the public to be able to want to adopt that as well. Additionally, within our city, we have 26 additional public or private stations. If you go on like ChargePoint or EVgo's website, you can see where they're located in either private garages, multifamily units, condos, those sorts of things. They are adopting that. What we also did this year is, we were getting a lot of calls from residents saying, I want to buy an electric vehicle, but I live in a multifamily unit, and they don't offer it. So what we did is we went back in our zoning code, and I'm happy to share that with anybody on the call, where we updated our zoning code to require any new developments that have 20 or more off-street parking spaces. It requires 2% of those parking spaces to have EV parking with the charging stations installed. An additional 3% be EV ready, where the infrastructure is installed, everything basically except the EV station itself. And then an additional 15% be EV capable, where the conduits run and you have the capacity within the electrical panel. So we're really building this out because as we see EV adoption, it's not only the current form that we see, whether it be in governments or in private fleets, but this is the future as well. So we want to be ahead of the curve, as Chris was alluding to in his presentation, really be ahead of the curve on this and really be a leader on being able to adopt this technology. So our best practices, and I included, as I alluded to earlier at the beginning of the call, our fleet director has done an amazing job at implementing this. And he created a best practices document, basically summarizes for all the fleet directors out there and even sustainability directors on basically questions we asked ourselves and things you want to consider when you're, whether it be installing charging stations or whether you're adopting your EV fleet. I know there's a lot of text on this slide, but the document that I attached to the email, it's about 3 pages worth of information that we have of just stuff that you want to think of, whether it be the placement of your charging stations, whether you want to be level 2 or level 3. And what we've been doing here is the level 2 charging stations that are connected to the network, whether it be through ChargePoint. They could be a little more expensive. If you're going to be in an area similar to like our public works facility where we have security at the front and it's just our vehicles basically in here, you may want to consider an inexpensive standard level 2 charging station that's not connected to the network. They're a lot cheaper. I think we got ours for around $500 or $600 a piece. And to even run, the really expensive part is running the electrical, but to install the 6 charging stations here at our public works facility, the level 2s, the standard stations cost us about $34,000. And it was a great investment on our behalf because prior to that, we had everyone charging on our level 3 and charging station. So basically supercharging the car. And that could drain the battery life if you don't have a good mix of level 2 and level 3 charging. Also, consider purchasing dual port instead of single port charging stations where you can charge 2 cars at once. We do that all the time in our parking garages, and again, has been a really, really big success. Level 3 chargers should be used in outlying areas furthest away from like your home base of wherever the vast majority of these cars are located. Just in case for us, we're a smaller city, so it's easy for us to get one from one point to another, but I'm thinking in terms of like big counties or even like Orlando or Miami-Dade County, Broward County, where you have a much wider area that you're covering, whether it be your inspectors or so on and so forth. So you may want to have strategically placed level 3 charging stations where somebody can go to if they think that they're not going to be able to make it back. That's less of a concern now with the extended range electric vehicles. As I said, we purchased the first batch of Nissan Leafs, and they had about 107-mile range. I would subtract about 20%, 10 to 15% of that because obviously we live here in Florida and we all run our AC all the time. So that does take a little bit of that battery life away. But even with that, it made perfect sense for our city to be able to transition into that. The vast majority of our fleet drives less than 20 miles a day. So again, this was perfect to where they didn't even need to charge every night. It was probably every other night or every third night they were charging the vehicles. Now, as I said, with the extended range vehicles that are getting 200 plus 250 miles per charge, it's your standard vehicle at this point. And that technology is going to continue to get better, but even that. For charging stations, this is also important. Survey areas to ensure that the chargers aren't located in flood-prone areas. That's big when we have hurricanes or just even now dealing with king tides and those sorts of things. Make sure you're locating them in areas that are not right near the water or anything like that, just in case you have flooding. Obviously, that's water, electricity don't mix well, so we want to try to avoid that. Also, consult with cities and counties in your area before developing your infrastructure plan. We did that with Miami-Dade County, and we have been working with Miami-Dade County on that and sharing where we're going to be placing, and also our neighboring cities like South Miami and the city of Miami, to make sure that all of our networks are connected. And something also important to that, try to connect and maybe use all the same type of system. So customers aren't going from like one city that's using ChargePoint to another city that's using like EVgo. Try to standardize that as much as possible. And that's what also we've been trying to work with the different charging station companies to see if there's some sort of standardization that we can have. So again, makes it easier for people to adopt this. As far as the fleet goes, obviously you want to look at how many average daily miles your fleet is driving, and being able to pick out which vehicles you can possibly transition, or the vehicles used for multiple shifts. That's something you also want to look at. You can estimate about a 30% reduction in the battery capacity over the battery's warranty. We're still not all the way along to where our vehicles are. We're about 3-4 years in on our vehicles, and we've had 0 problems with this. And for the fleet directors on the call, I know our fleet director can allude to this a little bit later on, but he loves these vehicles because he does not see them in the shop. They basically come in, ensure that for a PM check, basically make sure that they have a tire pressure, and they're back out the door. No oil changes, obviously, nothing like that. So from a fleet perspective, this gives his mechanics more time to be able to spend on some of our problematic larger duty vehicles like our garbage trucks or maybe our fire trucks or stuff like that. So again, no maintenance on these vehicles, which is the probably biggest selling point outside of obviously the sustainability portion of it and the clean aspect of it is just no maintenance. Constant fast charging, I already alluded to this, can accelerate the reduction of the battery capacity. So you always want to look at that and kind of have a mixture within your charging infrastructure of good level 2s and level 3s. And then also for us, we have lights that are on the top of our vehicles. So any devices that people have hooked up to the vehicles, whether it be running a laptop or anything like that, while they're sitting doing an inspection report, that does take some of the, and then the AC running, that could reduce some of the battery power. So just some things high level to think of. Again, we have a document that kind of outlines all of that in much more detail. And next question is how did we procure this? That's obviously probably the biggest question a lot of people have. is the procurement. Well, in 2016, when we purchased our first batch of Nissan Leafs, they were listed on the state contract at about $32,000. So what we did, and this is, again, I can't talk to enough about how great our fleet director is, and I know he does not pay me to continue to say that, but we did this MERS lease program to where we were able to take advantage of additional tax incentives that we couldn't otherwise accept directly as a government entity, and we were able to lease purchase the vehicles. So we basically paid everything except $1, and the leasing program was able to hold on to the title for a year, take the tax incentive, and then share that with us by basically reducing the list price on the vehicle. So basically, between the tax incentives and Nissan at the time was bringing additional tax incentives in, it took the state contract price of $32,000 and brought it down to $18,000, which obviously is competitive with any vehicle that you're going to buy for that type of use of what we were looking at. And again, I already alluded to this, but Nissan provided us two free level 3 fast charging stations with the purchase of our original batch of Nissan Leafs. So what we did after that is, as I said, we have 32 Nissan Leafs within our fleet right now, is we then started looking at the Chevy Bolt because it had a longer, more mileage, more range. So we actually purchased 16 Chevy Bolts this past year throughout the last 2 years, and we purchased those off the state contract. Same process. We leased it. We received about $3,000 of the rebate, and we're going to be continuing to do that. And as Jared alluded to with the program they have with Climate Mayors, these options exist, and it makes it a lot easier for fleet directors to be able to put that. Even though we budgeted our vehicles at $32,000, when we were able to bring it in at cost of like between $18,000 and $22,000, it allowed us to buy more vehicles at any given time, more electric vehicles. So again, it allowed us to invest more into that. And we basically, we purchased these vehicles through our vehicle replacement program. Our fleet director has about a $3.2 million budget. Obviously, when he has to purchase fire trucks or trolleys or anything like that, that takes a huge portion of that. But we're able to allocate, a significant amount of electric vehicles each year within our normal operation budget. And our charging stations, those have been purchased through our normal operation funds. So whether it be through our parking department that have been putting it in our parking garages and our surface parking lots, to whether it be our operational budget or our fleet director's fuel saving budget, we're able to purchase those stations and install them within our facilities. As I already alluded to, EVgo, we partnered with EVgo, and they were able to install the level 3 charging stations for the general public behind our city hall. I know that Tesla's also approached us about that, about installing charging stations at no cost, and I know a lot of cities have been approached about that. We've kind of held off on that temporarily because we want to, obviously Tesla's charging stations only charge Tesla vehicles. We do see a significant amount of those within our community, but all of our charging stations are universal and will charge any electric vehicle. And that's kind of where we've been going. Part of our plan too is our electric vehicles, we're going to rotate every 6 years to kind of retain that max resale value, because that leaves it 1 year left on the battery warranty. So we want to get that max resale value to then take that money and reinvest it into the newer electric vehicles. Last slide I wanted to touch on real briefly was alternative transportation, and just kind of talk how we as a city are looking at not only electric vehicles but other forms of transportation. We have a multimodal transportation plan. We live in obviously Miami-Dade County, and we got a traffic problem. So we're looking at different ways to where we can get people out of these vehicles, single occupant vehicles, and put them into whether it be our free trolley service, which we have 1.2 million riders a year on. That's done through the half penny tax we have. But tied into what we're talking about electric, we're actually looking at purchasing an electric trolley. Technology isn't there yet as much as it is on buses, but we have low floor trolleys that run throughout our city that we manage, and we're looking and we're working with the manufacturers on that to be able to go and purchase one of the first low floor trolleys when it comes out to the market. We also have a freebie service. I know a lot of cities have that running throughout their city that you see the picture down there in the bottom right. They run, basically, they're off electric, and we've seen huge successes in those, over 60,000 riders just year one. So just giving people another alternative, another option of alternative transportation, so they're more comfortable. We're really trying to connect that first and last mile of transit to make people feel comfortable on wanting to not take their personal vehicle. We have electric scooters. Here in Coral Gables, we were one of the first cities in Florida to pilot electric scooters. seen big successes on that as well. Very popular, seeing the business professionals driving around on their lunchtime on the electric scooter to get to lunch so they don't have to move their vehicle. And then obviously there too, you can see what we're doing on our other alternative transportation, similar to what Orlando's doing on making that investment in bike infrastructure. And we also provide free bike racks to our businesses. So if a business wants to reach out to us and say, hey, I want to put a bike rack in front of our business, we'll do it at no charge and come out and install that for them. So really continuing to invest in alternative and clean transportation, because as everyone has alluded to on this presentation, transportation is the biggest sector contributing to our greenhouse gas emissions, and that's really where we want to see our impact. So I know we have about 15 minutes left. I guess I ran a little late. I do apologize because we were ahead of time. So now I want to take the opportunity to open it up to questions. I know we have 64 people on this call.
Matt, there's a couple questions on the Zoom group chat.
Yes.
If you want to look at some of those and answer,
Yes,
we can start to call those out.
Absolutely. All right, so I'm going to take the first question, which was actually a comment from Chris. Let me skip down. Can you describe the Refuse EV a little bit? Chris, can you take that one?
Refuse EVs, I need a little bit of clarification. So we are currently looking at refuse trucks. Two of them, we're looking to purchase two recycling alternatives. Right now, as I mentioned, everything has moved to CNG, and we have a full-scale CNG fueling station at our fleet and facilities maintenance, all of that. So we are looking at electric refuse trucks. There's a few cities in the country who are starting to pilot those. For certain routes, we feel that they are capable. But right now, they're focused on compressed natural gas. They're on CNG.
All right.
I can just add a little bit too. One of the really popular aspects of the electric refuse truck is that it's so quiet. So a lot of times
Yes.
what we're seeing is that when there's a community that is concerned about that noise, that's sort of one of the aspects of it that they're looking at is the fact that they're just silent.
Even the CNG.
Yep.
Yeah, even the hydraulic hybrid CNGs, we've seen a drastic reduction in noise pollution to the point to where people actively tell that to the mayor. They're excited that they don't hear the truck in the morning anymore as they're, 6 a.m. or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's definitely same story here in our city. We are looking at different technologies with the garbage trucks and the refuse trucks, and that's something that we're going to be exploring here in the near future. But to the noise aspect, that's something that we deal with here at our public works facility. We're located actually outside of Coral Gables city limits, and we're right in the middle of a residential area. And that's one of the biggest complaints that the residents have that live right around here is the noise associated when we start getting out there at 7 in the morning. All right, the next question is, can you speak about building of infrastructure to support larger EV fleet? This is something that we were trying to wrap our heads around here in Sarasota. How much will we have to pay for wiring large banks of chargers so we could charge a large number of vehicles at the same time? So I could speak to that a little bit, and I'll have Steve come over and join me. But basically what we did in working with our parking department, is really the level 2 charging stations weren't that expensive to put in. I think we were estimating around between $8,000 and $10,000. Again, that's the connected ones that are connected to the ChargePoint network. So that included not only the cost of the station, but to the wiring. Now I can tell you from EVgo's perspective, they spent about $400,000 of their own capital to be able to install the level 3 charging stations at our city hall. Now they had to work with the utility company on installing a new transformer in there and everything.
Transformer.
That's where the biggest expense comes from when it comes from investing in this technology. So really working with the utility company on that, and then also making sure you have that electrical capacity. And if not, that's where the biggest cost you're going to have. That's why with these new developments, that's why we're asking in these new developments that they do this at the beginning, because obviously, like as if with anything else, going back and digging up all that and trying to do it afterwards is just way too costly to be able to do. So if you do it up front, that's obviously the best case. Now, if it's
in fact,
go ahead, Chris.
I was going to say, in fact, the Electrification Coalition has a study that shows the difference between a retrofitted and an EV-ready, kind of charger, and it's about $9,000 to $10,000 different, or potentially as high as 91% difference in cost. I mean, it's drastic, and there's a lot of details that goes into it, right? How long and far are you dredging? What's the current transformer capacity? Do you need a step-down transformer? Is there meter service at the site? I mean, there are a significant amount of kind of factors that play into the overall cost. But I think the resource that you all put together, Matt, that you and the fleet director, sorry, I forget his name, is amazing. I actually didn't realize, I didn't see it. I've already sent it to my fleet director and said, hey, check this out. This might be useful. But it's very helpful just in me reading through it to read through the thought process that you have when thinking about adding a charger. So fantastic resource. Appreciate you all sharing that.
That's this gentleman right here is our fleet director, Steve Riley. I give all due credit to him. I just
Thank you, Steve.
just talked about it.
Thank you, Steve.
I would add one thing.
So yeah, please go for it, Steve.
If you're really interested in just starting up infrastructure at the least cost possible, is start with all your secure facilities with those vehicles are parked overnight. They're not accessible to the public, and just simply install the wall hangers. You can do those for really, especially if you're a county and you have your own electricians there, or you might have a contract with electrician company. You know, the wall hangers, you don't, depending on the service that you have available at the facility, you may be able to simply add in some breakers, and it'd be a very simple, low-cost alternative than putting in the 408 volts 100 amp circuits to run your level 3s. So for those vehicles that park overnight, even if they don't park there, maybe you can then change your parking habits to park in a facility that has those wall hangers. And that's the cheapest way to go because they're very relatively inexpensive. You know, if you have, they don't require any kind of internet connectivity. And if there's an issue, say if you have a dual pedestal charger and that something happens to that one charger and it goes down, well, you lose all your ability to charge at that location, where if you have multiple wall hangers, you'd have to, you know, drop all the circuits and every one of those would have to go out at the same time, which is a little bit less likely if one breaks down, you simply just replace it at a low cost.
I think it's important to
Good points.
Distinction between behind the fence and in front of the fence as well. Right. A lot of cities get tied up in knots over trying to figure out how they can have public charging infrastructure and then also use it for their fleet and try to build that kind of a program. And that gets very complicated and very expensive very quickly. So it's, I think, important to make sure that we distinguish between behind the fence dedicated charging for a fleet and that public infrastructure too.
So I guess we'll move on to the next question. Can we talk about the distinction between EV ready and EV capable? So I'll speak to that, and that's referencing what we did in our zoning code. So basically, the EV ready was basically having 2% of all the parking spaces within the new developments have the charging station, basically all the infrastructure run and the charging station ready to go. And then EV capable, having the charging station installed. And then the EV capable is basically having all the conduit run and everything but the station, and making sure you have the electrical capacity when you're within your facility when you're building it to then be able to continue building that out. And that's actually something that we're not only asking our developers to do, we're doing that ourselves in our new public safety building, which we'll have coming online here in the next year. We're going to have 20% of the parking in that building, and it's going to be a 5-story parking garage. Is going to be EV ready. We're not even going to capable. We're going straight to EV ready because we're going to have it not only for some of our fleet, but also the general public coming in as well. So we're not only, we don't ask anything in Coral Gables of our developers or anyone that we're not doing ourselves and trying to take that leadership role on. Next question is, what are the operating costs for the DC fast chargers? Are you covering these costs by charging for the public access? So good question. So basically, I can tell you from the level 3 chargers we have that were donated by Nissan, those are for our vehicles only. So basically, we pay the electric bill on that. We haven't seen any significant increase, real significant increase in our bill. One of the drawbacks, and this is kind of outside this conversation, but all of our buildings run off single meters. We don't have it sub-metered, so it's hard to tell what that exact impact is having on top of all the other energy efficiency upgrades we're doing in our facilities. But we haven't seen any drastic increase related to that. Now, on the private side to where we have our EV Go stations that I showed you guys pictures of and talked about in the presentation. Those are all managed by EV Go. Basically, all we did was give them the parking spaces. They installed the infrastructure, they manage it. If there's if they go down for any reason, they're maintaining it. They pay the electric bill, and basically what happens is anyone that wants to use that charging station, including our city fleet vehicles, pay a nominal fee. I think it's like a $2 connection fee, and then like 60 cents a minute to be able to charge the vehicles. Now they will charge the vehicles anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour, depending on the range of that vehicle. Next question we have, is your city starting to install public EV chargers? Should they specify, if your city is installing a public EV charger, should they specify level 2 or DC fast charger? Is there a big cost difference?
Is there a big difference?
We can all talk to this
100%.
and say, yes, there's a huge difference. And I mean, what we've found is it all depends on what those parking garages or wherever you're having these located, kind of the tempo of that parking garage. If you see people that are like permitted parking, that are parking there all day anyways, then maybe it's better to do level 2 charging because that'll give them enough time. Now, if it's a location where you see a lot of people coming in really quickly and leaving, I don't know, I'm just thinking off the top of my head, like a rest area or something like that, those obviously you're going to want fast chargers in those because people are only going to be there for a really short period of time. But there is a significant difference. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, one thing I want to mention is the difference in cost is massive. You're talking $50,000-$60,000 for a level 3 charger. It could be as high as that much, versus a level 2 is really between, as Matt was alluding, $8,000 to $10,000 for a networked charger, somewhere in that range. So I think there's huge discrepancies. There's also huge differences in the needs. 90% of charging happens at work or at home. 90% of charging. Most people go home, they plug it into a level 1 often, they trickle charge at night, they drive to work, they plug into a level 2 that's at work. 90% of the time, that's how they're getting their fuel. The 10% is really when you're going to shop or when you're going on a potential long distance trip. And that's where you'll need the level 3. So really look at, I encourage you to look more towards level 2, although now level 3 is certainly becoming important, especially for these longer range vehicles. Your Teslas, your Chevy Bolts are now exceeding 240 miles. And so I'd say put those in key strategic areas with high traffic, near corridors, near highways and other large arteries throughout our communities where people can quickly pull off, plug in for 30 minutes and go. The other thing about the chargers is we try to specify them near recreation, near a coffee shop, near places like main streets where you have places to go so that they can plug in and in 30 minutes without even them realizing they got a coffee, they got a little, croissant, whatever, they sat down, by the time they look at their phone, it's already ready to go again. So we try to put those in specific places around where people can, shop and enjoy.
And to Chris's point, something that I alluded to on our presentation is definitely as you're developing your charging plan. I mean, we did it where we asked all the departments, okay, where are you parking your vehicles? And really looking at where we see a high demand on the residential, on our visitor or residential side in our parking garages, and really strategically placing those in really high volume areas to be able to get the highest utilization out of those charging stations. So really I don't want to say take your time, but really look into where and have a good plan in place to where you want to locate these charging stations. So you definitely have a very comprehensive network of charging capability. So
one thing to it, just to jump in really quick too, we have level 2 stations for behind the fence, non-network charging for as low as $500 for the equipment available on the driveevfleets.org site. And those are contracts that are available to cities, counties, municipalities, and a public agency.
Perfect. All right, so I know we got 5 more minutes, and we got a couple more questions. Okay.
I can take this next one, Matt, about the Driving on Sunshine program. So I have been in touch with Dory and the team about bringing this to Central Florida. And OUC, as part of our Bloomberg Challenge, we're also hosting a significant amount of ride-in drives. We're launching a new program where we'll continually do these quarterly. We've already done 2 this year. We're looking to do at least 1 more by the end of this year. And so these are very similar events. We call them, ride-in drive events for electric. But we are looking to couple the next Ride and Drive event, hopefully, with the Drive on Sunshine program. And so, Vanessa, and we're trying to include any and all municipalities and counties within the Central Florida area. It doesn't have to just be Orlando or OUC territory. Anybody within that, region can come to it. So keep a lookout for more information on that. I'll try to make sure to proactively reach out to you and the Winter Park team.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. All right, so I'm going to skip the next question because we kind of touched on that already. What are the impacts that local governments are actually seeing on their greenhouse gas emissions from EV fleet adoption and increased demand for electricity? And I know Dory kind of alluded to that. As I said, in our networked stations, we've seen about 28,000 pounds of greenhouse gas emissions reduced. We're seeing, obviously, our administrative fuel usage dropping drastically within our fleet. But obviously, a big portion of that is where you're getting their electricity from. And I'll do credit to Chris in Orlando. They have a lot more solar than we have down here. So obviously, their impact is going to be a lot less as far as what we're getting from the electrical grid versus maybe what we're getting down here. But I know that working with our utility company, they're installing a lot of solar down here to help feed the grid. But we're seeing, like I said, we're seeing large amounts of gasoline savings on our end. And on top of that, again, to kind of continue hammering that point home to the fleet directors, the maintenance savings are amazing on these vehicles. So being able to see all those savings put together, it makes economic sense to be able to do this, especially if you can get these vehicles at a much lower cost. All right, next one is, do EV car manufacturers offer training for fleet mechanics? And I know Steve will jump in on this one because we actually had our fleet mechanics go and take some training, so I'll have him quickly answer that one.
I know Cornelius Willingham from Nissan, they have certain training centers, and there's one in Miramar, Florida, I believe. If you contact him, he's the Southeast area representative for Nissan, and he should be able to give you some more information on that. I want to add one more thing about the lease. We bought the Bolts last year because of the fact that I believe it's the 3rd generation Leaf at that time didn't have the range that we were looking for. We were looking for over 200 miles. But now the new Leafs that are coming out, they are equivalent to the Bolts. And according to Cornelius Willingham, within, I think he said about a month or 2, they're working on a program that they will do a lease program to municipalities, lease purchase, where they will give you the entire $7,500 tax credit. In other words, you don't have to go to a leasing company and they take a little chunk of that. They're going to give you the entire $7,500 tax credit for everything that you buy. So we're looking at that pretty heavily. And if that comes about, then our next batch of EVs would be Nissan Leafs.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up because that's definitely something we've had ongoing conversations with Nissan, and they see the demand for these lease purchase programs, and I think that's an amazing incentive to be able to get cities to then, when they're choosing between either Nissan or Chevy. So, next question. Let me see. I'm going to skip over that next one, see if we have one that, Matt, did you do a procurement to choose EV? Also, sorry if this was discussed earlier, I came on the call late. So we are factoring in, we did put in for the VW settlement, we are requesting, we're still looking, obviously the cost difference between a standard trolley and an electric trolley. We've been given a range of about $700,000 for an electric trolley, and ours is typically cost anywhere between $200,000 and $300,000. So for the VW settlement, we're actually trying to see if there's any way of us being able to get additional monies to be able to invest in to cover that cost difference between the the diesel powered trolleys and the electric trolleys, and also too, through the VW settlement, we're trying to put requests in to be able to see if we can install additional EV charging infrastructure in that. I know we're right at the time, but I want to try to get through as many of these questions as possible. For the EVgo program, were the parking spaces originally paid for parking spaces? Yes, they originally were. We do charge to park in our City Hall parking lot, so they were. But our parking director, similar to our fleet director, is very forward thinking when it comes to this and planning out for EVs and wanted to see this EV adoption happen. So we gave up those spaces. Now they do still pay to park there, in addition to paying to use the charging station. So the paying for the charging station obviously goes to EVgo, and then the paying to park in that particular parking space comes to the city. So it's still the same type of setup. It's just for EV parking. All right, and
They still charge. That's good.
yeah, they still charge. And then let me see here. I'm trying to go through and see if there's anything that we haven't touched on. Have you taken future proofing into consideration for your city's EV infrastructure? I'm assuming by proofing you mean basically looking at if it's in a flood-prone area or anything like that. Yes, we have. We're not locating our charging stations in any, let's just say, vulnerable areas that are prone to flooding, whether it be from hurricanes and storm surge to just regular flooding. We have them located in our central business district area, which is actually some of the highest elevation in Miami-Dade County, all relatively speaking, of course. So yeah, that's why we basically have targeted that as where we're putting it, locating our charging stations. Excuse me. Can you share your typical maintenance requirements from your fleet? I feel that we're being overcharged for PM and require a bit too often. Steve, you want to touch on that? Like what we typically, may spend on preventive maintenance. Now we do our own preventive maintenance. We have our fleet of mechanics.
Is that for conventionally food vehicle?
Yeah, comparing conventionally to maybe
EV. Well, I can tell you the EV cost that we've had for the entire fleet over the entire 4-year period has been less than the cost of one EV. We spent about $31,000, I think, totally on all the preventive maintenance and services. That also includes accidents. We had some fender benders and stuff like this. That also includes labor. So it's really inexpensive. As far as the cost for a conventionally fueled vehicle, that individual should contact me directly because there's a lot of variables in fleets that go into labor costs and parts markups and stuff like that. And I need to get a better understanding of their methodology as far as pricing is concerned.
Okay. Thanks, Steve. All right. I know we're 3 minutes over time. I'm going to just take 2 more minutes. I think we have one more question that came in, and I definitely want to try to get everybody. All right. I think we're good. I hope everybody has really enjoyed this presentation, and it's brought a lot of resources to the not only Sustainability Directors Network, but also to the fleet directors. And I definitely want to encourage you guys, all of us standing in this room in my office here, and I'm sure Chris on the call as well, will echo this sentiment. Please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We are happy to meet with you guys. I can tell from our perspective, we've met with dozens of cities already, whether they are local and come visit us, and we share resources with them on how we've experienced it. They can tour our facility. Jared and Dory are awesome as far as the resources they can provide. They just gave you a brief snapshot on what they're able to do. They're happy to meet with you guys individually, and they're nodding their heads at me. They're happy to do that and provide those resources to you guys. And I definitely want to, Steve, I think you had one more thing to add.
I want to add something about infrastructure. Number one, you don't have to have a secure parking space for infrastructure. You can put a charger there and have a keypad to enter a code in order to activate the charger, and just make sure that those codes are only known by fleet, the people who drive the fleet vehicles. So you don't actually need to have a secure parking space, something behind a fence to add. Secondly, and probably most importantly, is when you're developing your infrastructure plan, you need to standardize your chargers, because there's a lot of companies out there getting in the business. Everyone's got their own little access card, their own little RFID, with their own little coding and stuff on there. And the last thing you want is have a fleet vehicle with multiple access cards. We know how much they lose their keys or fuel keys or whatever, to have different access cards and different methods to access to the chargers. We have EVgo, which was put in for free. We didn't complain about that because they put in the infrastructure. We don't pay for it. We don't maintain it, but they have a completely separate access card than our other charging company. Is it? No, not EVgo. ChargePoint cards. So we actually have 2 of them.
And that's what the webinar that I mentioned in my presentation on October 9th is. Interoperability is the idea of being able to have a seamless charging experience and making sure that the
Right.
networks are talking or communicating and being able
It'd be nice if we had like a statewide method of a statewide access code, so you could use state facilities or other county facilities, and all that's billed to a specific account for your city. That way there you could extend the range. I mean, think about if you had level 3s throughout the state, you simply travel to, plug in for 30 minutes while you're at lunch.
All right, well, again, we're 5 minutes over time. I'm glad that everyone seemed to really get a lot of information out of this webinar. Again, I want to allude to it again. Don't hesitate to reach out to us. Please, we're willing to share all the best practices, and we're still learning from each other. We talk to Jared a lot and Dory a lot, and Chris, and we all coordinate together. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Thank you guys again. You have the presentations. I am going to try to see if I can get a copy of this webinar and then share that. So if there's anyone that wasn't able to attend, please feel free to forward them the presentations, our contact information. And if I can get a recording of this webinar, I'm definitely going to try to do that. I saw we had about 60 people on this webinar. So thank you guys for your interest in this topic, and I hope that it was useful for everybody. And again, if you have any other questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you again, everyone. Have a great one.